Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Way with Maps. It's your host, Maps, aka Javier, and today I'm joined once again by Nano. We said we were going to do episode 2 of the environment and sustainability, so here we are today. And also, I'm joined by Eva, who is a friend of Nano's from back home in Iowa. So I guess, yeah, introduce yourself, guys. Say hello.
Hi, I'm Nano. I'm back.
That's lit. That's a good one.
Thank you.
I'm Eva, Nano's friend from back home. We both did exchange, so that's how we know each other.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm an environmental science major, freshman at ND, so yeah.
Right. And for those of you that don't remember, or if you haven't watched the first episode of Environmental Sustainability, that's the first episode we ever uploaded to the YouTube sphere. So check it out. Nano is like my first guest
Yeah, I should
there.
probably actually introduce myself because I don't know if people are going to watch both episodes.
go ahead,
my name's Nathaniel Burke. I go by the nickname Nano. I'm an alumni hall with Maps. And go dogs. And Eva and I are both from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I am studying environmental engineering.
Right. So cool stuff. So first of all, I kind of, before we get into talking about the environment and stuff, talk a little bit about how you guys met. You said it's through exchange. What is exchange for people that don't know?
Yeah, so basically, we both applied through Rotary, which is an international organization that sends high school students on exchange. And me and Nano both did a gap year. He went to Argentina and I went to France. So we just went to high school, stayed with host families, and it's like a cultural and language type of program. So definitely we're working on our Spanish and French, and yeah.
Super not academically rigorous.
Oh, not very much.
But it was like culturally rigorous.
Yeah, fair.
That makes sense.
Very worth it, right?
And we had a lot of training and stuff. So that's kind of how me and Nano got to know each other.
Oh, training? Do they like just for cultural purposes?
Yeah, like sensitivity to stuff and like how to deal with, because it was a hard year, like in certain aspects. So I think they prepare you for that, you know, being on your own, and yeah.
That's cool.
How to handle stress and anxiety and being so far from home and knowing you're not going to see anybody for a year, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Also how to be a representative of Rotary.
Oh, true.
I'm wearing my Rotary shirt
And America.
today.
Represent.
Rotary believes in planting trees, so that's cool.
Well, yeah.
You're the tree.
You're the tree. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. So just for context purposes, everyone should know, if you saw that episode. If you haven't seen it, I will keep saying this because it's one of the best episodes, but or one of my favorites at least. But obviously I know Nano through, we both live in alumni, but Eva and I actually also have a mutual connection because I'm taking French and she knows French, and so she comes to Café Français.
Yeah, did you hear? We were playing French games together.
Yeah, some pretty weird card games the French have.
They were weird.
but it was a good time, and it's good. Thanks for helping me know what I'm doing. You know?
Of course.
So we have coffee and chocolate croissants, which are pretty gas.
I really enjoy the French cafe.
Yeah.
Quick cultural question. Eva, how common are croissants in France? Is that just Americans thinking that they eat a ton of croissants, or do you guys actually eat a ton of croissants?
They're pretty common.
Okay.
Boulangeries, which are bread stores, are on every corner. And so people just kind of get, I don't know, it's like a snack in the afternoon, because the snack is a big thing in the afternoon. So people would just eat croissants, you know, with le petit café.
Nice.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
So before we start, biggest takeaway from each of your experiences.
Oh my gosh, bro.
This is a big question.
You could say 3 things because I feel like that's a very broad question. So I'll allow very broad answers.
I like when people ask me the top 3 things from my exchange, because I've had to answer that question before, but now I can't remember what my answer is.
I'll go for one of my biggest takeaways is that people are the same everywhere in terms of culturally they're different, but I had a lot of friends down there that I'm oh, this reminds me of this friend from high school or whatever, you know, and people have the same kind of concerns, worries, I don't know, people are just people, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I feel sometimes, I know we live in an American bubble, you know, we forget that. Yeah.
That's cool. Eva?
I think mine, it's just it was eye-opening to how I think about culture, and how it's not just traditions or food and stuff, but it's really like there's a lot of differences in the way people think, and like these aren't necessarily good or bad, but they're just like things that we don't realize. I don't know if that's really vague, but I like had a lot of friends who were, because my district in Rotary was really big, so I had like a best friend from Taiwan, one from India, a lot of friends from Brazil, and I just got to like talk with them even when there was language barriers, and just like living in a French family that was like, France is not that different from the US, but like in certain ways it is. So it was just like, I don't know, interesting to just like live with people who think differently, be able to adapt to that. Yeah.
Right. You guys were both there for a year?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like 11.5 months.
I feel like that's kind of cool because normally, like, I don't know, even like abroad programs are like a few months.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? Or like tops. Like
yeah.
a year, that's a long time, you know?
Yeah, it's like different. Because like if halfway through the year, I was like just hitting my stride, you know? But then the second half of the year, that's where I made really close relationships. Right. And I don't know.
But I feel like also like by the time you leave there too, you made like really close connections. With
Oh,
a
for
lot
sure.
Of people
That's
there.
like that's like a second home. That's like family there.
I was like walking around the neighborhood on my last day, like recognizing random people.
Oh,
and
I
was
know.
Like,
oh
man.
Yeah.
So do your host families talk like do you speak English with them, or like is it like very like you're in the moment, kind of you have to learn the language, otherwise
Yeah,
you're like,
it's very intentionally like immersive.
Yeah.
And like we were taught to even make it that way. Like my second host family, the father spoke pretty good English, but it was like, oh no, like we're here to speak Spanish or learn Spanish.
Right.
So it's like only Spanish in the household.
Yeah, I had a friend who like stayed with a host family that really wanted to practice their English, and she wasn't like super, I don't know, like she didn't tell them like, hey, we're going to speak French. And then she really just didn't end up progressing as much in the language in the beginning until she had a family that really forced it. So like, I don't know, my first host family, they knew English, but they would never speak to me in English. And I only found out that my host brother spoke English when I had my grandparents come visit. And I was like, you're kidding. You've been able to speak it this whole time.
That's
like,
so cool.
It was funny, but it helped me a lot. Like she would correct me every time I made a mistake. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's a cool experience.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking about it. Anyways.
Well, no, there are also some like cool differences interesting differences between France and the U.S., specifically with regard to like sustainable practices. I remember the summer we both got back, we went to like a little restaurant market area and sat down and talked, and she was just like blowing my mind with how woke France is. I don't know if you could talk about that.
It's crazy because we had completely different experiences, and like Nano came back to the U.S. and he was like, "Oh, thank God, I'm back in a place where they recycle."
Well, I mean, yeah, I'd like forgotten recycling. You know, like I don't know. That's not like the top priority there. It's not really even the top priority here at Notre Dame. It's not even a priority here at Notre Dame. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Well, and I came back and I was like, "This is disgusting." Like we still use plastic bags in grocery stores, and just the wastefulness of the U.S. in comparison to French culture. Like, it's just, there's a huge difference in how people view like individual impact on the environment over there versus in the U.S.
Right. In Puerto Rico, I feel like a while ago, like a couple of years ago, they, because I remember when I was a kid and you used to go, I don't know, this is the way they do it still here in the U.S. I've only really been to one supermarket here in my time at like Notre Dame. Not that I haven't been to other supermarkets before, but I mean, like, just contextually, I guess you guys have lived here for a lot longer than I have. But my point is that there used to be, like, this... So you had, like, obviously the little conveyor belt that, like, the items roll over, and then the person scans your item, and they put it in a bag. And you'd walk out of that, like, a supermarket with, like, 12 bags. If you do, like, I don't know what you call that, but, like, you know how, like, you visit the supermarket, let's say, like, I don't know, once every 2 weeks or something to, like, buy bulk.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, in Spanish, that's a compra, which is a buy. Like, that's when you go.
It's like a Costco run.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, let's call it that. So whenever you go for, like, a Costco run and you walk out the Costco or at the supermarket with, like, 12 bags or whatever.
Yeah, you're loaded.
And, like, I don't know if it was, like, outlawed or if it was just, like, the companies themselves that, like, stopped doing that. But what they do instead now is, I don't know if this goes for all supermarkets, but at least the ones in, like, my community, like more often than not, you'll like go into a supermarket and what they have is you'll be able to purchase like permanent like grocery bags, and so like
Oh yeah.
you're like meant to keep them in your truck, and you also have like I don't know like 10 of them, but like you don't throw them away. You don't like you don't use them for like.
See, no, those type of bags are definitely widely available here. There's the opportunity there, but it's just the habit that is the hardest thing to overcome in the U.S., I think.
Right, but like so is that what it's like kind of in France, where it's just like the French also like don't they like I mean stereotype, but like I mean I've never lived in France, but like it's always been like an understanding of mine that I don't know how French consumerism works, but at least the stereotype is that it's not as kind of commercial as the United States, and it's more so like there's little like shops, like you said, like a boulangerie. That was a very American pronunciation of a French word.
Okay.
But like a boulangerie where you go, it's like more of a like local bakery as opposed to like you walk into a supermarket and you go to the bakery section of this like Costco,
Oh yeah. No, when I came back to the U.S., I walked into a Hy-Vee in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I was like, oh, there's so many aisles. Like, what are all these options?
Wow.
Like, grocery shopping I do have to preface everything I say about France with the fact that I did live with host families who had means to afford good food and quality food. But grocery shopping with my first host mom, I remember everyone is my street that I first lived on was Le Boulevard de la Croix-Rousse, and had a had a market every day, fresh food market. So I would just like walk through that on my way to school, and like there were vegetables, cheese, like just and my host mother had this. I don't even know how it looked like a rolling bag, like maybe something you'd like walk through the airport with, but that's what she would use to put in her groceries. And then we would go to the organic place on the end of the road. Like she would just walk down the road, grab what she needed for the day. And we would go to the organic place at the end of the road to get like nuts and like, I don't know, jam. And then there was a boulangerie just around the corner. So she would just give me money to go buy a baguette. And like, yeah, we just never went to any big grocery stores. And I don't know. It was cool because like she thought I was the worst cook ever and that I didn't know how to feed myself. So she would like challenge me to go make meals or like send me out into the market with, I don't know, $10. And she's like, what are we going to eat today? And I was like, okay, let's go find all the ingredients.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Also, I feel like, but my point is that I feel like that idea of going to different places to get like smaller markets to get whatever you need and traveling like up and down a road or whatever, it favors you having a more permanent bag that you carry, because if you just go to one place and they give you all the plastic bags you need there and you get everything you need, you're walking out of a store with like, I don't know, I want to say like over 20 items for like a Costco run, and then like you take that and you put that in like your car or whatever. Also, like I guess I don't know, was that different too? How in France is it more common to walk to like a store, whereas opposed to like the U.S. it's more common to? Is that a thing that happens?
I mean, I lived in a city and we rarely got in the car. Probably like once a week for my host brother to drive to Mass downtown, but car use, like the public transportation system is fantastic over there.
Right. I feel like it also has a lot to do with the fact that it's kind of just a more cultural thing that Europeans in general just walk a lot to places.
Yeah.
I know because my aunt lives in Ireland and my cousin, before she went to school in Brooklyn, New York, where she's going to school now. But my aunt is an engineer, and so she got moved a lot from place to place. So Puerto Rico, she lived there, of course. She lived in Seattle for some time, and then she lives now in Dublin. But for some time, my cousin went to school in England, in the UK, and like I know that their habits changed a lot, and it's kind of like whenever we went to visit, it's like that style of, I don't know, like you're walking a lot to like different places, and you're like stopping at like the local market, and like it's like just that type of vibe where I don't know. I feel like in the U.S. it's very common to. I mean, I don't know. It probably
Drive
has
everywhere.
Yeah, to drive everywhere.
Absolutely.
I feel like it also probably has a lot to do with how cities are arranged.
Oh yeah.
And largely the lack of public transport. Because I'd say like even the city I lived in Argentina was just leaps and bounds ahead of like Cedar
Really?
Rapids in terms of public transport.
I feel like consumption also has a lot.
I don't understand why that is. Like,
Yeah,
why
that
are we
doesn't
so
make
far
sense.
behind?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it has to do with probably like the time in which the cities were built, A, and then B, the style of consumerism that exists.
Oh, absolutely.
So, for
That one,
example,
yeah.
if I'm walking out with 20 plus items from a store at once,
You need a car.
you definitely need a cart because you're not just going to walk like a few blocks with like 20 items in 12 bags. Number one. And then number two would be like also, well, like I mentioned, most of these cities were built a long time before these cities in the U.S. were built. So people would normally just walk to places, you know? And then another thing I feel like fresh produce is more common in other countries as opposed to the U.S. in terms that like it's very common in the U.S. for me to be like, I need milk. And then I have milk that doesn't expire for a month. But then you go to Europe and then like, for example, in Ireland where my aunt lives, she has to buy milk like every week and it comes in a smaller portion because obviously like it doesn't last as long, but it's a more fresh product. And then B, you go more frequently to the store so you don't have to, you only walk out with like 2 bags instead of 12, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like those three things kind of, like that's where that comes from.
Yeah, absolutely.
My host mom was always really concerned where all her produce was from. She was like, no fruits from Spain. Like, that is not allowed.
Why? Because that's too far away?
Too far away.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
crazy.
And no, it was like, it was a thing that
Good for her.
like, I'm telling you, living with my first host mom, like, she was so concerned about her individual impact on the environment. But it wasn't just her, it was everybody. Like, that's the huge difference. But I went back to the US and I was like, where is my food from? And you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you live in like northern, like what regional, more or less, area of France? Northern France?
Southern.
Southern France. So that's
by the mountains.
So that's like so that's still like super close to Spain.
Oh yeah, but they were like, no, too far.
Yeah, that's
only
crazy.
local.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, oh, if it's the north, then I guess it kind of there's some
But
logic
like,
there.
Yeah.
but we're out here like getting like most of our bananas from Central South America.
Oh, yeah.
Coffee, avocados. You know.
It's interesting too to see that because I feel like the EU, the European Union, also has an interesting way of producing like food items and foodstuffs because I know that certain countries get assigned certain products. So like you have countries that are like really good at like fishing, and then they'll tell like I don't like this is just an example, but let's just say they'll tell Italy, you're going to be focusing on like fish. And that's like what you're going to be producing. And then they're like, okay, like Germany, you're going to be producing like, I don't know, like mutton, like sheep, you know, mutton, and then like, and then pork or whatever. And then they're like, France, you're going to be doing chicken and like beef. And so like they'll assign different, like they'll assign different foodstuffs to different items. Like I know, like I remember, like again, I'm referencing Ireland a lot because that's just where my aunt lives. So that's like my point of reference. But I remember that like every time we'd go to get orange juice, it would always be Spanish orange juice because they are probably like a warmer one of their regions, and so they get like the orange production or whatever, or you know, so like they kind of have a good, which I feel like is probably I don't know, but I assume the United States works on a similar wave with states.
Oh, for sure.
So I don't know, like, but it's interesting to see how because even if like, oh, let's not get any. Like food from like this country because it's too far away, it still shows that regardless of that, you're willing, and in a way because if that's the country that mass produces an item, then everything that's not from that, like let's say if Spain produces the most oranges, those are the cheapest oranges you're going to get. You know what I'm saying? So it speaks also volumes to people are willing to pay, I assume, more for just like more local or more fresh stuff. You know?
Well, French people also just think that their country can do everything and has the best food ever, and because it's such a diverse landscape that I don't know, they kind of have everything they
That's
need.
fair. There's definitely I feel like a nationalistic thing going on too with like not in a bad way, but like just definitely. I mean, the European countries have so much history and they're so united as a people. Where I feel like it's a different type of nationality. This is like a little bit crossing over to my political science expertise or lack thereof, but I know that, like, for example, like French nationality stems from or not nationality, sorry, like nationalism stems from being a Frenchman or like French person, I mean. Like,
because they have a very specific culture that they can identify with.
But so it stems from like if you're nationalistically French, it means that you were born in France and that's like where you're from. Like
that's where your family's from. That's where
that's where your bloodline is. Like all these like years back. The same with England, Germany, Italy, Spain. Spain. Whereas in the U.S., American nationalism stems from an ideology, not a nationality.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And no, that was, for me at least, that was super interesting on exchange too. Having to talk about the American culture. And for me, that's always like from like elementary school, we were taught that, oh, America is a melting pot of a bunch of different peoples and religions and backgrounds and cultures and everything. So it's really hard to list. They're like, oh, what's a very typical food dish in the U.S.? And I'm like,
I got that so often.
Yeah, I'm like, pizza, but that's not really American.
Yeah, it's kind of, but I feel like it has a lot to do with that because kind of the nationalistic aspect of being an American comes from just like having these ideals and beliefs of like freedom, of liberty and expression and all this, like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and this whole. But it's an idea. It's not so. It's not so much it's not that we feel American because we are born in Kansas or Utah or New York or wherever, you know. You'll actually see, I think, more of a nationalistic aspect from individual states than you will from like someone will be more proud of being born in New York, and so they'll be like, oh, I'm proud of being born in New York.
Yeah, for sure.
As opposed to, I'm not saying that people are more inclined to feel more proud of being from their state than from their country, but in terms of like that nationalistic aspect of it.
Oh, absolutely. Because like even on exchange, I would identify more as an Iowan than an American because we would meet so many other exchange students from New York or Oregon or Texas, and we all had such different, well, not completely different, but like there's a wide variety of experiences we all shared.
Yeah. So that I feel like that probably has. I mean, I don't know, that's an interesting aspect of like that cultural like aspect or whatever. But it is certainly interesting to see how like these countries, and I know you mentioned a big one, Nano, is Germany, and how they're like doing a lot of like good stuff with
with the environment.
Yeah, with the environment.
Oh yeah, I had two girls from Germany live in my city in Argentina, so I got to know them pretty well. And one of them had been a vegetarian for like 7 years before she went to Argentina. And then in Argentina, meat's a big deal. She was like, yeah, I'm going to eat meat while I'm down in Argentina. But yeah, and that was just a super normal thing in Germany. And like they don't use air conditioning. She was like super surprised that we were using air conditioning in Argentina. They just don't use air conditioning in Germany.
It's like illegal in France to put it in apartment buildings, like new ones that you're building.
Yeah, that's insane.
They also like don't need it.
The U.S. could never. We'd be like,
we could never.
It is my right to have air conditioning. Well, I mean,
and here we are wearing coats in grocery stores. It's fine.
It's definitely like a regional thing for sure. I don't know if Europe is higher up than the general landscape of Europe is higher up than the U.S. I feel like that might be true in some sense of the way, but you could also,
it gets hot, you know what I'm saying?
And I think it's also like, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to talk to Canadian people, but it'd be interesting to see because I feel like the border in between Canada and the U.S. is more or less where Europe, like the European region lies, in terms of like longitude and latitude.
Yeah, but you got to take into account like the Mediterranean Sea and everything. It gets hot there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
But people just like
they just decide to put the future of the earth ahead of their individual comfort for a season.
Well, I think they've never thought to put air conditioning in all of their buildings.
Yeah, wow.
I don't know why that's an American thing. They just open the windows at night and then they close the blinds during the day so the sun doesn't get in, and they just know how to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That is super interesting.
Yeah. That's kind of crazy. But I do know that like, I don't know, Europe do be popping off with these like
they do be popping off
environmental advances.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like I don't want to say they're like the leading people in the world, but they're definitely up there.
Oh, like in Germany, they I saw a map of the world in terms of how much sunshine each area gets, and Germany really does not get that much. Like in comparison to specific parts in the US or even like Iowa. Like I think Iowa gets more sunshine than Germany, but Germany is largely powering their country off of solar energy,
Right.
which is just super impressive and an example of the direction we should be headed. Well, I'm going to add something, though. I don't know how like, it's going to be really hard to mine all the minerals to create all these batteries and for like electric cars or solar panels or this and that. So
Yeah.
I don't know where we're going there.
Yeah,
But
it's a difficult conversation to have, but I feel like that's why it's important to have it. I think it's particularly important to acknowledge, at least, which I don't think most people don't, which is another way of saying I do think most people do acknowledge that we are currently in the midst of like a crisis. I just don't know if people necessarily agree on how big of a crisis it is.
yeah, and I think that's in large part due to a lack of education regarding that. I remember the first time I took an environmental science class, I would leave, it was junior year of high school, I would leave every single day, like with the world around me falling down. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why did I just drive to school? Like,
Yeah.
why did my dad is a high school, like a teacher at my high school. I'm like, why did we drive separately? That was just like something that I'd never thought of. And I guess like from a young age, you're taught, oh, don't litter, you know? But to a certain extent, like there are way bigger problems, you know?
Yeah. Do you guys think it has a lot to do with like states in and of themselves? I mean, like you guys both have a similar thought spectrum on this issue, but you're both from like the same state.
I think we had different high school experiences.
No, yeah, for sure. That's not what I mean though. I
Well-
mean like in terms of like this education thing. Do you think it's let's say for example, do you think people in like it's a regional thing? Do you think some people in let's say Iowa get a more environmental education than in some other states, or do you think it's just individual people that have different takes on the same level of education?
I would say it's largely by choice,
Okay.
like individual choice. Oh, some schools, wait, Eva, I don't know if your school offered an environmental science class.
They didn't.
They
and,
didn't.
And my school
Yeah.
was bad. I like debated people on the crisis.
Yeah.
Like the existence of the crisis. So there was a lot of my school was largely Republican because I went to like a private Catholic school. It was pretty different from Nano's and people like just didn't believe in climate change.
Right.
Yeah. Meanwhile, like at my school, this environmental science class was one I took on a whim just because my soccer coach was the teacher, and he was like, "You should take my class." I'm like, "Oh, okay," and then it just blew my mind. So I think it definitely was not talked about,
Right.
on a large scale.
Right. Do you think that
Like, should it be? Absolutely.
Yes.
I think like I was talking with some other students here at Notre Dame about this, specifically Anthony Rivetti.
so just for context purposes, Anthony's our boy. He's also a dog. He's like one of the members of our very close group of friends, and it's interesting. I like one of the things. I feel like I've spoken about this in my other like more talking about Notre Dame and my experience here. Also like cultural aspect things. I feel like I'm super proud that we have a very diverse group of like friends that not only come from different places within the United States and outside of the United States, but also
Ideologically.
ideologically super diverse and like different levels.
Really?
Yeah. So like Anthony probably went to a school, well, he did go to a school very similar to Eva's, in terms of largely conservative. Probably a lot of people there that didn't know about climate change or didn't care or didn't believe it.
Right.
So like Anthony told me like our conversations were his first exposure to like the climate crisis
Right.
and everything. And now he like recently just wrote a paper for his global affairs class about how like education should require like environmental
Really?
education.
I didn't know
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Because I think for public schools, I don't know what it was like for you, Eva, but like we all had to take an econ class and a gov class to graduate.
I think that's a state requirement.
That's a state requirement. Yeah.
It's not,
So,
I don't know.
But I think like
Right.
an environmental science class, or maybe not even a science class,
Yeah.
but like an environmental studies, or just to see how it, because like this is going to be one of the greatest factors of like human survival and suffering in the 21st century.
Right.
So I think it's like, it's irresponsible not to teach it.
Yeah. I think just for context purposes as well, Anthony does believe in climate change.
Oh, he does. He very fully does. We're
But
not.
but
Good to know.
but my point is I guess for one, I think Nano, you within our friend group have probably the strongest education and interest and understanding of the issue. I feel like this is something I've said before too. It's that I've always known that it like climate change is like a real thing, and it's always been like pertinent and important to me, even though I wasn't taught it in school. But when it really like kicked in for me was obviously I live in Puerto Rico, and when Hurricane Maria struck in September 2017, I was kind of able to witness it firsthand. And that's when the drasticality, I don't even know if that's a word, but that's when like the urgency. The
severity.
Yeah, the urgency, that's when it showed for me. Wow. And I was like, oh. And so like that's another thing. It's like we've had conversations where, I don't know, it's like people talk about how many people are going to die. And then I feel like I am a big advocate of helping people understand, no, dude, look at people are already dying.
Oh,
you know, like,
oh, it's a current.
Yeah. I'm from a place that people have like been dying, and it's probably going to keep. And then so that was Puerto Rico. That was 2017. This past season. What do you call it? August, September, October season. Fall. Yeah. Sorry. This past fall. Cool. This past fall. It was the Bahamas that got struck by a hurricane, if I'm not mistaken. And so they took the large hit. And also Puerto Rico wasn't the only region to get hit by Maria. Obviously Florida was affected by it as well, and a lot of the smaller Caribbean islands also got hit. And like the death toll, and I don't know what it is in total. But you know, it's a lot of people that definitely like suffered. And then there's also it's also like, yeah, like a lot of people died, but even those who managed to survive, a lot of people, like you mentioned, like suffered a lot.
Suffering, yeah. And I think that's very hard for us to see in an American bubble sometimes, or like from Iowa, you know, like that doesn't, bubble. Right. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, like people on the East Coast, they get hit with hurricanes. But a lot of times the connection isn't even made between severe weather disasters and the changing climate.
Right.
But also it's just like, if it doesn't affect you day to day, you probably won't care. Or like people are unlikely to care.
It's crazy though too, because I feel like the East Coast, I just want to say something first though. It is a different type of storm. Yeah. It evolves not only in like severity, but also like category, but also in like the type, because of just the region you're in severely affects the weather and how it shows itself. But the U.S. has been hit by like Katrina, Sandy, even that same year that Hurricane Maria hit us. Irma had also hit us lightly a week before that, and Irma also hit the U.S., I believe, and then Harvey also hit Texas that same year. And I feel like that also made at least national news in terms of it was a big deal, and people know the devastation that these storms do have. It's weird to see though that like no one is jumping the gun on this, and they're just, I don't know, it's like I feel like it should at least to me it felt like when I went through it, it was like a wake up call. And I feel like the United, like especially for like on an island level, I mean, not just for me as a person, but for people here, I feel like, but it obviously has a lot to do with the fact that the U.S. is like a lot larger than Puerto Rico, of course, and all these regional places. But I feel like it's not a wake up call. It hasn't been a wake up call here yet. Like people. I think this shouldn't even be like a partisan issue. Oh,
I think that's in large part the reason people haven't been woken up to this problem.
Our country is really divided right now. It's almost like if you identify as a Republican, you're not allowed to believe that we should be doing something about it, you know? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's insane too how, like, for example, I'm going to use our current president as an example. I think avid listeners of the show should know my take on it. I'm not a big fan of our president, but I'm also open to a Republican president. Like, I don't mind it. My point is that I don't think President Trump's an accurate representation of what the United States is. But I think also it's interesting to see how people, let's say, like not all conservatives, but some conservatives will jump to the defense of President Trump only because he's a Republican. And I don't mean this only in like the national, in like the like climate change issue. I mean in general, because I feel like everyone should condemn the president for not believing in climate change. Like that's a universal thing,
Yeah.
but I feel like that kind of leads people to just for the sake of saying or protecting the reputation or status of
The party.
the Republican president that is now, they kind of sacrifice these like core issues,
The truth.
right? Like these issues
I
for like just his credibility or his. And I'm not saying that conservatives across the board support his President Trump's lack of I don't know, or let's say
Wokeness?
Yeah, wokeness, or that they support his ignorance. I'm not saying that at all, but what I am saying is that I think it's crazy to me how, and I think this is a common thing in Puerto Rican politics as well, and probably the politics, like the political spectrum in general. But people are quick to defend their political party, and oftentimes representatives get mixed up with political parties, and it's important to distinguish them from each other. You could have a really good representative of a really bad political party, and I'm not saying that like the Democratic or the Republican Party is good or bad. I'm more so like in that context, I'm talking about like Puerto Rico. I'm a firm believer that we have like really bad political parties. But you could have like a good candidate within them, right? Or you could have like a really bad candidate within a good political party, or a candidate could be really wrong about something and still be in a good political party. And I feel like it's oftentimes people like try and defend like President Trump, and bro, he's just wrong about that, and the proof is in the pudding, and you just gotta like see it. And then I get it, like it's unfortunate that he. Like, I think of it as like he's just a president. He just happens to be conservative and Republican, right? But you could also, I mean, have like it's not completely oblivious, like the concept of having like a Democratic president that also doesn't believe in climate change. I'm saying like it shouldn't be a political thing.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a party value.
Right. And I don't know, it's weird. I feel like that harms the issue a lot, especially because it does get tied into I think the reason why it's mixed up, or the biggest mix-up, is there's a lot of talk about how the changes that are needed to be implemented, are going to affect like the economy, and it always gets mixed up, at least particularly with this administration. And I should know because Puerto Rico's being denied like some funds that they need right now to fix. Now we're having earthquakes, fun times, and we were also like we were given resources. I don't want to say that the U.S. didn't support Puerto Rico, but we weren't given enough resources. And this is only like one side of this is just my story, and there's probably a million untold stories out there, but it always gets mixed up with, oh, how much money are we giving to X region or Y region, or the Paris Climate Accords are bad because it puts the United States at a disadvantage against all these other countries. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's always where it goes. It always goes to the money. It always goes to the economy.
It's all about the money.
Yeah, I feel like that's the
people donating,
right?
Lobbyists. It's just
like that's the cop out, I think, for those people that
or inaction. Yeah.
And it's sad to see, because ultimately, and I know you've said this before, that like there won't be an economy if there's no planet, dude.
You know what I'm saying?
so it's kind of crazy in that sense, and I feel like, again, and for example, and I'd love to have Anthony on the show. I know that we are planning to have an episode where Anthony and Nano come on and talk about, I don't know if one or multiple issues. It's going to be like a little bit more debatey, because I mean it's going to be like a normal conversation for us, but sometimes we do get pretty invested in our conversations, I should say.
Oh, absolutely.
We're all friends and we all love each other and we all come out with smiles at the end of the day, but in the moment we all have like opinions on issues that are like I should say like solid opinions on issues, and we all have our own takes, so that's going to be interesting. But I do know that like Anthony's a firm believer that innovation will catch up to the problem before it has enough time.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that I've been like hearing about, I don't know, I feel like I talked to you guys about this idea of like a sixth mass extinction,
right.
And that a lot of people just think that we can engineer our way out of it, which may be fair. I don't know.
Maybe, but I think a lot of times, well, actually, like every time any great breakthrough has happened in engineering or the scientific community is because it's been rooted in like the scientific studies and research and everything. So I think it's like it's like you're mistaken if you think we're going to have an engineering breakthrough while at the same time ignoring that science is currently telling us to like fix our habits.
Oh yeah, when is it going to start is the question,
right.
you know, because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, it's already late. And I do think that it is it's like just scientific.
Well, actually, there's a lot of like disagreement, and I'm still not positive either, but there's a lot of disagreement on the timeline and projections.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, like but how long is like,
right.
like when are we going to be screwed?
I know there are like there are like estimates that say that we should reduce, I think it's half of our emissions by 2030, which is only 10 years away, Rip City. And then I think all of them, or, you know, almost all by 2050. And bro, it's looking tough, you know, like.
Well, yeah, especially as like a world, as an international community. I don't know if we're all going to be able to do it, but to me, that doesn't really matter.
Right. There's also
with regard to like whether or not we should change, because like any amount of change that we enact in the U.S., like as leaders of the world, maybe people will follow. Right. But even if they don't, we'll reduce suffering at least a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. That's the other big argument I was about to say, that that is, why should the U.S. be reducing emissions if China and India aren't going to be doing it anyways, and they're going to end up screwing the world anyways? Which is such a weird argument, in my opinion, because it's like, why would
it's the tragedy of the commons?
Yeah,
that's what we talked about day one in environmental science, my junior high school.
Tragedy of the commons.
That's so true. Do you know what the tragedy of the commons is?
No, I don't actually.
So, do you know anything about like game theory?
No, okay. Probably not.
I was going to try and explain it through that, but I'll just do it in this way. So basically, the tragedy of the commons is, and this is not dictionary definition, but no, correct me if I'm wrong.
All right.
But it's essentially that certain countries are okay. So basically, I remember because I read this for my PsySci class last semester. So in the UK, in England, they're like let's like pastors or whatever. I don't know what do you call shepherds? That's what I was trying to say. Like shepherds that would like lead sheep. They had their own private lands, like grazing lands, but then there was also a common land for all the shepherds. And so the thing with the benefits of having your sheep graze on the common land is that the disadvantages are distributed equally amongst all the shepherds in the world, or like all the shepherds in the land, but the benefits attribute only to you. Mm-hmm. So all these shepherds, i.e. countries, have the incentive to make their sheep or graze their sheep in
and destroy that
the common land. But then when all of them are doing that, it gets completely obliterated, and that detrimental outcome affects them all, because now they have a destroyed graze land and they don't have that many. Like the sheep can't eat anymore.
This is like ultimately prioritizing your individual benefit over the greater good. Just because, like, in the same way that like like me driving to school, like I would be like, oh, I could choose to bike to school instead, but literally everybody else is going to drive to school, so I'm not making a difference. It's not worth it. Maybe somebody's going to take like my parking spot or something, whatever. But it's. Yeah, but like you just can't fall victim to the tragedy of the commons. Everybody counts,
and it's a
Go vote.
That's exactly like what the French mindset was, actually. Like, and I've debated this with my brother so many times, because I came back and he's like, "You're not making a difference." Like, you know, I'm like trying to do these things, not eating meat, avoiding plastic, and every French person would believe that, you know, their actions make a difference, but. You know, my brother will tell me, I'm not throwing him under the bus, but I am.
Yes, sir.
he'll tell me all the time, like, the problem is not you. The problem is big oil companies, it's like a political issue, and we need to change policy to actually make a difference. So my impact is not going to matter. And that's like the biggest difference that I saw between the U.S. and French mentality.
Right. And I think one of my favorite quotes with respect to like the tragedy of the commons is that like even if like us not eating meat's gonna reduce the demand of the meat industry enough that they'll stop like producing meat. Like the quote is that like I'd rather light a candle than curse the darkness. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
like
yeah.
one little candle's not gonna. I mean, like you're not gonna light up the whole world with one candle, but hey, you're lighting up like a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I like that.
Do what you can, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So like that's the tragedy of it. It's that like countries have the incentive to work towards their they can't in any way harm themselves. The harm of the earth is equally attributed to all the countries in the world. But the
Therefore,
US
they don't care.
but the US not limiting, or the US or any other country not limiting their emissions, the benefits of that only attribute to the US or to X, Y, and Z country, like whichever.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. There's a big study I remember that I did that I read on not a study, but a story that I read on last semester for my poli-sci class as well, that was Maine lobstermen were facing an issue, a crisis, where they were just fishing more lobsters, and the state wanted to implement or like scientists said that they should
Stop.
they wanted to
reduce their total.
Right. They wanted to limit. Yeah. But or like the state or whatever. I don't know. The point is that these Maine lobstermen had been implying, and they still do, the same techniques of fishing forever. And they were saying, no, we're still using the same fishing techniques. We just don't, for some reason, there's just more lobsters this year. And so they had like a legal battle with, I don't know if it was the state of Maine or whoever. But the point is that they were able to overcome the tragedy of the commons because they worked together, and they believed in the idea of, I can't remember what they called it, but it was basically like if they caught, for example, like a female lobster that like had eggs, they'd throw her in the water. They have like different size requirements, right? If they know that one female lobster is fertile, they'll like cut a notch into her tail, so if another lobsterman catches her, he knows, like, to toss it back. Oh, that's what they called it, tossing it back for tomorrow or something like that.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
So essentially, they were able to kind of, and they won their case, and eventually studies came out, and they were right. What had happened was that in Massachusetts-ish area, there was a decrease in the amount of cod because there were like high tides. And I think cod was, I can't remember if it was cod or any other fish, but the point, it was like a certain type of fish that is one of the main predators of lobster. And and because there was a lack of those fish, the lobster were able to reproduce exponentially more. And so they were implementing the same techniques. And I remember that their opposers or opponents, I don't know, they were telling them that they should use more efficient traps. And they said, no, like one of the reasons why, like we use faulty traps not faulty, but like old traps on purpose because it limits the amount of lobsters we can catch. And they're so inefficient. The amount of lobsters, they like put a camera or like recorded it. The amount of lobsters that went in, like hundreds of lobsters would go into the trap, but so many of them would walk out. And when they pulled the traps up, they would only catch a certain amount. And it's because they throw back for tomorrow. They like keep in mind that if they fish all the lobsters right now, then there won't be any lobsters tomorrow for them to fish.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's like one of the examples where people were able to overcome the tragedy of the commons. So it certainly is overcomeable. I don't know if that's a word, but it's able to, like, we are able to do that. It's just a matter of, I don't know, like we also need to, it's interesting because I do think that, especially once again, I feel like someone should make a compilation of the amount of times I've said this statement right here. And it's, as a Puerto Rican, I feel like I have a third-party point of view on the world. I feel like I say that in every conversation I have, and especially on every episode of this show. But as that, I do feel like not to say that Puerto Rico is international. I'm for statehood. Make a compilation of that too. But like, I do have an international perspective on the United States, is what I mean. And I feel like people that have an international perspective on the United States see it as the moral and center of democracy and like good in the world. I feel like Americans and the United States sees themselves as that as well, as like the center of like morality and democracy and like the pinnacle of what countries should be. So it's interesting to have that on one end, but on another end, not be like, okay, then we should set the example for climate change, you know? Because if not, we're going to lose to China. It's so weird to see that as an argument, you know? Because then, so what are we then? So does it matter? You know, I feel like we're quick to be like, yeah, we're all for democracy and we're all for the better of the world. And we're quick to criticize Russia or China or any of these, or Iran or whoever we're like, no, that's anti-democratic, or that's not what you should be doing. Look at our government, look at how we do things. But then we're also like, yeah, dude, but also if we stay in the Paris Accords, we're going to lose to China. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a weird thing.
Like, who are we? Are we really this force of good in the world that we claim to be if we can't see the bigger picture in that way? I think there's just like such a culture of consumption and almost, you know, like selfish individual gain in the United States.
And short-sightedness, I would say, too.
Yeah. It just like, it's hard for Americans to limit themselves and be like, I don't actually need all of this.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but it's interesting to see how, another thing that I noticed here, because like Nano mentioned, I do think like meat consumption is a big part of, not only, you went to Argentina, but I feel like across Latin America and South America, and the Caribbean, it's just a part of, like, it's just a cultural thing, you know? But it's interesting to see the amount of meat consumption. Like sometimes, like last week, they had flank steak in the dining hall, and I was like, I didn't want to eat it, but I was like, I need to try what flank steak tastes like in the U.S. So I did it for the cultural experience.
For the culture.
Yeah.
But when I walked up, it was surprising because they ask you, oh, how many slices do you want? And they're not tiny, they're like not massive slices, but they're a good amount. So I asked for 3.
They're like a portion and a half.
I mean, I asked for 3 slices because I thought that was fitting for the amount of rice I served myself. But then immediately this dude after me goes, yeah, can I have 7 slices? I was like, whoa, dude, that's half the steak, bro.
Yeah.
So it's just, I do think there's also, like you were mentioning, Eva, a discrepancy in the amount of food that is consumed here. And we did mention this in the first episode that Nano was on, which was that America is like one of the most obese countries in the world.
Yeah.
And and I feel like there's probably a lot more to the food epidemic that's happening here.
Oh yeah, food justice.
Yeah.
All about it.
In terms of like how much food people are consuming here versus the rest of the world. There's also something to be said about how cheap food is more
Less
lower
nutritious.
quality food is available for cheap.
People are obese and malnourished.
Yeah.
So there's also a lot to say about that as well. But I don't know, it's like all these factors contribute, but I feel like we got to start somewhere. I feel like you guys are doing like a good job. I feel like
Thanks, Hobby.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm not plant-based or vegan or vegetarian or whatever, or pescatarian, but I do have an appreciation for what you guys do, and I also try to limit myself in like meat consumption.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's all I could ever hope for, is
Yeah.
that like somebody changes at least a little bit.
Right.
You don't have to stop eating meat entirely. It's just like
Right. And
little
I do try and limit myself because we did identify in the last episode, Nano and I identified that beef is the enemy.
Beef,
Oh, yeah.
red meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do try and limit myself, particularly when it comes to that. But you guys, because I have vegan friends, and hopefully you can meet one of my vegan friends that from back home when you come to Puerto Rico, Nano. But they've given me arguments that are valid as well. The most common argument I've been exposed to is they do it for animals and animal cruelty. But I do think that at least your cause resonates to me more about like this whole Earth thing, and I feel like it's just a lot. And obviously, there is an argument to be made about animal cruelty. I'm not like discrediting or undermining that argument. Yeah, you also should. I guess it just comes down to this: you should be more aware of where your food comes from and how it's produced, for both the safety and like animal rights and rights of animals, and for the safety and like right to have a like safe planet or whatever, or, like a good planet that doesn't implode. You know?
Yeah. I would also say that meat consumption is also a public health problem, because I had, like last semester I had to write a research paper, and I wrote it on not whether plant-based diets are better or worse for you and the planet, but like the question of why people aren't switching to them, because pretty much like the verdict is out for the scientific community. It's just plant-based diets like reduce your carbon footprint a ton, and they also reduce your risk for heart disease and cancers and diabetes. It's a lot of stuff. So that like is also very related to like obesity in America, I think.
Right. And
in the public health.
Yeah. And we talked about this too in the last show, so I won't say too much about it, especially because we were coming down to the last 5 minutes. Didn't feel like an hour.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
we didn't even talk about the book.
Not at all.
We'll have to do it
the
again.
book.
We're going to have to go for episode 3, guys.
Yeah, I guess so.
But we spoke about in the first episode that we did about climate change and the environment, about like changing your diets to cricket-based diets.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
I know that Eva, was really excited when like
I listened to that one.
and so shout out Alexandra, my little sister. She's doing like a project back home where she's making a cookbook of recipes that you can do with like of stuff you could cook with cricket powder.
Super hype.
And I don't know.
Have you tried any?
Oh yeah, I've had like lots of desserts,
Pasta,
like brownies. I've had pasta. Also like different dishes as well. You could incorporate it into like salsa, for example. Like if you're making tomato sauce for your pasta, it's cricket flour, so it's like you don't see it or notice it.
Sure.
You just mix it into like let's say you get onions, garlic, tomato, olive oil, and I feel like and tomato paste, and that's enough to make like a tomato sauce for your spaghetti. And your spaghetti is like just made with like seminola flour or whatever. It doesn't require any eggs in it, and so you just incorporate cricket flour into your tomato sauce recipe, and you don't need to add any meat to that dish because you get the protein from the cricket powder in the sauce. So that's just one example. But I mean, I don't know how far along the book's going to be when you come to Puerto Rico, but it'd be interesting to see if like it's like to see whichever stage it's at, because I feel like that'd be something that you'd be pretty interested in.
Yeah, I'm trying to make a cricket powder protein shake.
Oh.
Yeah.
Put water and cricket powder and drink it.
Pulling up to the dining hall with your cricket powder.
I feel like, one of the things we talked about too was that the stigma behind it and consuming insects. But when you pulverize it, it's just flour, dude. It looks like it looks like brown sugar, but more fine. It looks like it's like not. You don't even see it, and you can. I mean, I don't know the ethics behind it, but you could definitely give someone like a regular cookie and then a cricket flour cookie, and they would not tell the difference. I can guarantee that, because it's only if you tell them it has it, they'll probably try and look for flavor in it, but where it doesn't exist. But if you don't tell them, I'm pretty sure they couldn't tell, and it's that's the idea is for people to start, I don't know, looking for new ways that we can feed ourselves. And also it's one thing like for the earth, it's another thing that we're also like the Earth's population is predicted to grow exponentially within the next few decades, and then it's also a matter of how are we going to feed that many people, because it's going to take that much more food production.
That is so like on par for this book that we were supposed to talk about.
Yeah, I mean we're
plugging it.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Eva and I are going to come back and we're going to talk about a book called Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, and
it's a good book.
Yeah.
So you guys can either read it until then or not, and then listen to us talk about it,
and then read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just read it.
Just to think about it.
A lot to think about.
A lot to think about.
Yeah, it's funny because this is really coming down to the wire. A minute and 10 seconds. But this is the part where I struggle to make my outro. But yeah, no, for sure. We'll do episode 3. Maybe if you guys are available next weekend, we could record, or, whenever. I like to set up these episodes, given enough time so that I don't have another episode where it's just me talking, because I feel like those are boring for me and for everyone involved. I don't know if anyone enjoys those, but yeah. Anyways, any last comments?
Yeah. Read the Cliff Notes of Ishmael, at least.
Cliff Notes.
Eva?
That's all I need.
All right. Go green.
Go green.
Yeah.
All right. Well, last 30 seconds, so this is really where I struggle.
Right. You can cut it 30 seconds early.
I don't like to. But anyways, yeah.
All right.
Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Nano. Thank you, Eva.
See you next time.
We'll be seeing you next time. And yeah, this has been The Way with Maps. I'm your host, aka Maps, and tune in next time when we talk about Ishmael the book. Peace out.